Before we get into the details of listening to and talking to our stakeholders, I want to take a moment to look at the relationship. The single most important thing that you can do to improve communication between you and your stakeholders is to improve those relationships, to earn trust, to establish a rapport that will speak more for you than the words that will come out of your mouth in a meeting. UXers are so good at putting the user first, garnering empathy for and attempting to see the interface from the perspective of the user, yet we often fail to do the same thing for our stakeholders. Let's apply these same principles to the people that we work with so we can build a better product together. So in order to know how to approach people and respond to them, the first thing we have to do is see their perspective, to learn to speak their language and to get to know them. An important step in this process is to stop and remember that the people we work with are human. They're imperfect. They have lives and families outside of our project. There's other things happening in their world that may influence how they react to us. Maybe it seems obvious, but I find that it's actually really important to just stop and take a moment and consider what people are dealing with in their personal lives. It goes a long way toward helping me understand how they might respond to me in the moment of a meeting. So, was your colleague short with you in the hallway about that new interaction you made? Maybe she's dealing with some issues in her personal life. Did that guy in the meeting with your boss totally throw you under the bus and blame you for something that he was responsible for? Maybe he's feeling pressure from his boss. So just as often as you need to, stop, take a look at the people around you and remember one thing. They are human. Another step towards seeing the perspective of our stakeholders is to create shared experiences with them. I'll never forget how drastically my relationship with a colleague changed once I had a shared experience with him. Josh, he was in a similar role to mine, but in a different department, and we used a lot of the same resources. Our paths would cross on projects occasionally. My impression of him was that he was a troublemaker. He was unorganized, inconsiderate, he was not respected by other people, and it was really difficult to work with him because it just seemed like his ideas were creating more work for me. But by chance, we both ended up working at the same conference one year. We drove there together about 3 hours one way. We stayed at the same resort, and we ended up setting things up every day and talking to people and eating most of our meals together. So obviously, very quickly I got to know him. Almost immediately, my opinion of Josh changed. From then on, his suggestions were innovative, right? He was no longer inconsiderate. He was just a little busy and less mindful of the details. Nothing had changed except my own perspective of him and our shared experiences. From then on, it became much easier for me to work with Josh. In fact, he really became one of my greatest allies. Now, you don't have to go on a road trip to create shared experiences, right? Finding that common ground can be as simple as just pointing out something interesting in the hallway on the way to the meeting. I mean, maybe you notice they have the latest mobile device, or they're wearing a brand that you like, or they have that souvenir from Paris on their desk, right? Anything you can do to explicitly call out the common ground between you is going to go a long way toward reminding you and everyone that you have common interests. Now, empathy is one of the big buzzwords in UX right now, right? If we can develop empathy for our users, then we'll build better applications. But what about our stakeholders? We need to empathize with them too if we really expect to get through to them. Developing empathy for our stakeholders means just attempting to look at our project from their perspective, so we're no longer defensive and protective of our own ideas. We realize that their reactions and suggestions are based in a reality that for them is more important than our own. When you have empathy for your stakeholders, you not only understand their perspective, but you're driven to action. You want to make changes to your designs because you feel their pain. You might still disagree on the solution, okay? But at least now you're better prepared to talk to them about your choices. I was working with an executive recently who was very much a visionary thinker, but we were just building this minimum viable product. So at the first couple of meetings, he was underwhelmed by just the basic functionality. Now, he knew the constraints of the project, but we really needed to keep him excited about it. So I chose to start bringing 2 different mock-ups to each meeting. One of them was this baseline MVP, which was just kind of a modest improvement over the existing application. But the other one was this wild-eyed, no-limits vision of awesome that we would never be able to pull off, at least not in the short term. But it allowed me to hold his attention by keeping both concepts in front of him. Oh, do you like this over here? Yeah, okay, now look over here and approve this so that we can take one step in that direction. And you know what? It worked. I couldn't have been prepared with that approach if I wasn't able to see his perspective effectively. Now, seeing the perspective of our stakeholders requires a lot of patience and work. It's not something that comes automatically. But it's also not too difficult, because the most important thing you can do to see the perspective of your stakeholders is just simply to ask them questions. You can ask them questions about their personal lives. Sure, find out what their interests are. Some simple, open-minded questions, maybe like, what did you do this weekend? Or how was your holiday? Or have you seen any good movies lately? Or one of my favorites that I use all the time is, so what's new? That's a great general question. Right? These basic questions can be used with anyone, and they'll give you a starting point for you to understand where your stakeholders are coming from. Memorize these questions and use them with everyone. But it's not a one-way street, okay? You should also offer some information about yourself. What interests do you have that you can share to create that sense of humanness? Okay, so for example, I went camping this past weekend. Do you like camping? Or we hosted my family for dinner last night. Do you like to cook? I saw a great movie yesterday. Have you seen it? Offering people this glimpse into your own life is a great way to create a sense that they're just like you. But talking about our personal lives doesn't always give us what we need to really understand them in the context of our business or organization, right? So find ways to informally ask their thoughts and opinion on the current project too, right? So for example, what did you think of that meeting last week? Or how's your work going on the other project? Do you have a lot going on this week? You're giving them the opportunity to tell you as much or as little as they want. You're creating a sense that you care about them and their opinions. Sometimes it might even be appropriate to be more direct than that, okay? You might just ask them, what's your opinion on this project? Or how does it affect your job? What's your priority for this project? Allowing people to express what might be their own opinion or perspective gives them permission to deviate from the party line. They can speak freely without the pressure that they're going to upset the process or misrepresent the company. I was having some difficulty with a manager once who was really pushing us on some priorities that kind of seemed to conflict with our goal of improving conversion. I asked him, how would this project affect him? And he told me that his highest priority was actually migrating off the old platform, because he was paying for both the development of the old platform and the new platform. And so as long as both of them were on his budget, he was under a lot of pressure. But he never could have gotten approval to build the new platform we were building if the stated goal hadn't been improved conversion. So while our official mandate was to increase conversion, his own personal agenda was to replace that old platform. Well, knowing that significantly improved our ability to communicate with each other and allowed me to understand his perspective and the way that he responded to our designs. Okay, so now that we've considered the best ways of seeing our stakeholders' perspective, let's look at the kinds of people who influence our projects so that we can tailor these approaches to them. Every project has a variety of people who influence the outcome. So to keep it simple, I want to assume that there are really only three main types of people that you'll have to understand. The first are your team influencers, the people on your direct team. Next are the executive influencers. These are the people who oversee your project. And the last group is the external influencers. These are the people that are outside of your team and outside of your direct influence. Now, depending on where the person sits in the organization, it might be difficult to get to know them well enough to understand them and see their perspective. But our job is to identify these people and seek to understand them as best as we can. Now, the team influencers, they're easy because we get to work with these people every day, right? We have instant access to them, plenty of opportunities to get to know them. Your team is the best source of people who can help you on your project. You have daily opportunities to pour into these relationships for the benefit of the user experience. The more time you can spend with these people describing solutions, communicating value, establishing a foundation of vocabulary, the better off you'll be as far as creating a culture that follows your lead on important UX decisions. Understanding executives and managers can be a little more difficult because we don't always have easy access to get to know them. However, they're really important to our success because they're the ones that make the decisions. In this case, you have to use keen observation in every meeting to get to know the people who know them, like an administrative assistant or a direct report, and do your best with the limited information you have. In short, you've got to figure them out and react to them almost instantaneously. But over time, you'll develop a rhythm that can add to this bucket of understanding and help you communicate with them. Now, the external influencers might be one of the best kept secrets in the organization. Who are the people who have the ear of the CEO, right? What people do you know that are good at spreading the word and connecting other people? Often we may not even know who these people are because we only hear about them secondhand. So it's difficult to find these people, but working on relationships with other influential people in the organization can give you a real boost toward making your case when you need help. We need to work harder to identify these people and solicit their help when we need it. Okay, so now that we've looked at very generally the kinds of people we work with, let's take a little closer look at some of the more common roles on our design projects and identify the values that are going to drive their reactions to our work. As we look at them, I want to write a user story to help us see their perspective. Okay? We want to understand how people's roles affect their viewpoints. So let's take a look at the roles on our team, like executives and managers, developers or engineers. We have product owners and project managers. And then we also have people in marketing, content, and creative. So first, let's take a look at executives and managers. Okay, so it's no exaggeration that executives and senior managers have a lot on their plate. But it's less about being too busy, and it's more about their brain capacity, right? They're constantly switching between completely different topics, projects, and challenges. Your job is to bring them up to speed as quickly as possible, present your solutions, solicit their feedback. They want to know that you've put thought into it, that you've made smart decisions. Okay, so what do they value? Well, because they value concise information, you need to focus on getting to the point. Because they value growing the business, you have got to focus on accomplishing the goals that are going to help them get there. Because they value solving problems, your job is to describe the solution. Now, when we look at developers, right, developers are usually looking at a backlog of bugs and enhancements on the one hand, but they're also looking at a roadmap for future development that's bigger than they can manage on their own. Right? They tend to be more analytical, so they may not even see some of the details of the interface that you've designed. Your job is to help them see the value in everything so that they're excited about the end result without obsessing too much over the work that it requires. So because developers value efficiency and feature creep, you need to focus on maximizing the existing scope. Reusing UI patterns is really important. Because they value things like edge cases and potential problems with the design, you need to focus on providing a clear understanding of all the use cases in the application or the website. And because they value understanding all of the effort that's involved in building this application, you need to focus on communicating the overall value to the users to keep them excited about it. Okay, so if your organization has a dedicated product owner, working with them might be one of the primary things that you do. Now, the great news is they really want their products to be the very best. So they're going to be one of your greatest allies, and they'll get really excited about your designs. Now, taking design direction, however, from a product owner can be challenging, though. So because they value innovation and creativity, you need to focus on finding new approaches to solving the problems that are going to help them. Because they value meeting their business goals, right? You've got to focus on connecting your design decisions to those business objectives directly. Because they value the big picture and the long-term roadmap for their product, you need to focus on how your design is going to move them forward in that direction. Now, most projects are also going to have a project manager, even if it's a combination of the people from one of the other roles. They like things like Gantt charts and deadlines and meetings, right? Your job with the PM is to be sure that they always understand where you're at in the process, to alert them about any concerns as soon as possible. So because they value deadlines and staying on schedule, you need to focus on the possible efficiencies of reusing design elements. They value that efficiency, and they're looking at their budget. So you need to focus on managing their expectations or any changing requirements or scope. Because they want to keep everyone in the loop, you've got to focus on updating them on their progress at all times and making sure that they know where you're at in the process. Okay, so I hate to put all of these people into the same category, but there's a lot of overlap in the roles of marketing and content and creative and public relations. The point is, there are people who are going to be more concerned with the content, with the look and feel or the copy of your website or application. Maybe there's branding guidelines that drive these conversations. Your job is to be aware of all of these requirements and incorporate it into your designs as soon as possible. So, because they value brand consistency across the organization, You've got to focus on creating styles that match that brand. And if there is a difference, communicating it to them as soon as possible. Because they value a consistent voice in the copy and in the messaging, you've got to focus on making sure that the copy you use is already approved. And if it deviates, being able to explain why. Because they value creating a product that provides value to the customer and is sellable, you've got to show that specific value proposition in all the features and micro interactions that you design. So while identifying these people is really valuable, none of it is going to mean very much to our projects if we don't use this information to help us build good relationships. The overall lesson is this: communication is much easier in good relationships, but good relationships take real work. In fact, building good relationships is a pretty basic and straightforward process. You get out of it what you put into it. So let's take a practical look at some things you can do to improve the quality of your relationships with stakeholders. First, just be yourself. Too often people are so serious about doing serious work seriously. In an attempt to be professional, some people, maybe even you, never let anyone see who they really are. You need to show people that you're human, reveal your own personality when it's appropriate. Sure, there's absolutely times when we have to put on our professional hat and get things done. But there's also in-between times when we can learn to be human with those around us. So that's fine. Be guarded and cautious when you think you need to be, but find opportunities to be candid and human too. Finding that balance is really important. Next, do stuff for people. If your success depends on them, then their success should depend on you too. Offer to help them get ready for a presentation, right? Check in just to see how they're doing. Leave a note on their desk to say hello. Pretty much anything you do that is outside of the usual way your team communicates and relates to one another is going to make an impression on people that you really care. So taking that a step further, give people simple gifts to show that you care. I'm not talking about bribery, okay? I'm talking about thoughtful gifts that are useful or meaningful. Give them a handwritten thank you note. Buy them a small gift that shows you're interested. Or be the kind of person that brings breakfast to the early morning meeting or do the mid-afternoon coffee run for everyone on your team. I'm usually actually looking for ways that I can give things to people, just small things for people that I work with so that they know just how much I appreciate and value them. Once I gave someone a license plate frame that said, "My other car is an airplane," because I knew he owned a small airplane and really liked flying. Another stakeholder of mine was a hobbyist photographer, so I bought him this coffee mug that looks like a camera lens. Another coworker of mine who was getting married, I bought him a humorous book about what bachelors need to know before the wedding. Okay, these gifts weren't generic. They were tailored to something specific that I knew about them. They knew that I had listened to them, that I understood something about them. Now, it might seem like focusing on stakeholder relationships has nothing to do with design at all. A lot of designers expect their designs to just speak for themselves, as if you could just hand your stakeholders some mock-ups and wait for them to just give it a stamp of approval. But it's surprising how much a good relationship can affect that other person's view of your work. Having good relationships really does make our designs more acceptable to the people that matter the most. So the more that we can show them that we're people too, the more value and stock they'll put into our ideas, our suggestions, our proposals. We're not just robots churning out stuff to get a paycheck. We're smart people with great ideas working together to create great projects. Focusing on these relationships is more than just being nice, right? It's more than just making sure that people like us. It's reminding them that we're people too, that we can be trusted to create great solutions. Having good relationships is going to help make sure that happens. So, if we really expect to communicate effectively with our stakeholders, then we need to use the same skills that we use in identifying with our users. We have to understand the people and the roles and the positions on our team, recognize what's important to them, and make notes of the best ways of approaching them. All of these insights are going to set you up for success and give you a head start to preparing for the meeting.